Hey everybody, it's Carm here. I'm coming to you on a lovely Sunday morning. Just about there, almost a few more days officially till fall. And it's been beautiful lately, especially in the mornings and evenings. Very cool and crisp. Warming up a little bit, but still really nice. And I wanted to come out and talk about an album I've been listening to a lot lately. Really, and about an artist that been a fan of for a long time, who recently lost. Real quick though, I want to make a mention of, and I'd seen on Sherv's video, if you know Sherv, Julius Jabbar, had mentioned that if you know Michael Valentini, who you'll see in a lot of comments, probably some of you who are watching, on your own videos and been commenting for quite a while. Very, wonderful, thoughtful, very in-depth knowledge and passion for music. He's now started making his own videos. He just made a second video either last night or this morning, and just watched it earlier. So really happy to see a face and a voice behind the writing, behind the commentary. So yeah, please check out his videos. He's just started making them, and yeah, I'll leave a link in the notes. So yeah, please be sure to visit him. And yeah, I wanted to talk about Gary Peacock. Wonderful bass player, composer, improviser, collaborator, everything. He recently passed about two or 3 weeks ago, at the age of 85. Yeah, born 1935, and he passed on earlier this month. And one of my favorite bass players, and really among my favorite musicians. First became aware of him in Keith Jarrett's trio back around the middle of high school, maybe junior year or so, and gradually started learning more about him. And what struck me from hearing his playing for the first time was his tone. Incredible tone, real deep, rich. You could really hear the wood of his instrument, really what it was made of. And as he had pointed out in an interview that I was revisiting recently, that's the thing about, he recorded for ECM a lot over the years, a great deal, since the 70s, and he said, they always captured the sound of one's instrument, what it sounds like in the room and what it sounds like to oneself. And of course it's very important to anyone who's having their music recorded, of course. So you really heard, and felt how deep his instrument was. And then of course his playing, which was so singular, whether improvising or playing more thoroughly composed pieces. Just an incredible sense of pacing. Yeah, his feel overall, and the way he responded to others, group context. But I wanted to talk about a particular album. I've been revisiting quite a few of his things, rather than show a bunch of things that I have him on. Just wanted to focus on really a Touchstone album, and really, well, not just a further introduction to him, but also these musicians involved, and also really to freer forms of jazz and improvised music, and also getting into ECM at the time. I think I was a senior when I picked this up. In the Evenings Out There, recorded 1991, came out in 93. Yeah, Paul Bley piano, Gary Peacock bass, Tony Axley drums, and John Sermon baritone, sax, and bass clarinet. Now, previous to picking this up, had no idea who Paul Bley was, had no idea who Tony Axley was. Again, I only knew Gary from the Keith Jarrett's trio, and I only heard one or two albums up to that point. And John Sermon, I only knew him from Bar Phillips' Journal Violon 2, which I'd picked up as a sophomore in high school and had no idea who any of them were. So blind/deaf by when I was just getting into ECM. So this brought me into a whole nother, a few steps forward from all of that. Just learning of all these musicians, and really that approach to music, which is more improvisational. Now, this same lineup did another album, I think it was under John Sermon's name, called Adventure Playground, which was more of a unified group album as far as them playing. I think for the most part, most of the cuts have the whole group on it. Now this has various configurations of the musicians from solo, duo, trio. I think only one on quartet. So, which is an approach that ECM has taken over the years. Whoever the album is given credit to, they'll have sometimes just different. They won't all be playing at the same time, the whole band. So, yeah, just a really, you know, like a further introduction and, yeah, just going further in general into the label and these artists. Starting in, we have a solo piece by Paul, Afterthoughts. Starts off as a very kind of traditional sounding, almost as kind of like a torch song kind of ballad. You think it almost sounds like you're going to hear vocals and lyrics coming in, maybe something very wistful and romantic, late night kind of sound to it. Again, kind of like a torch song. But then, of course, if you know Paul's playing, as he goes further into it, he starts sort of deconstructing his own lines. You know, it starts off sounding very composed, you know, just kind of stating the theme, and then just gradually deconstructs it. Another artist with an incredible sense of pacing, where he'll kind of speed up and slow down, and almost sounds like he's almost like chasing after his own melodies in a sense, trying to catch up to them, and then catching up to them, and then they turn around and say something different, and he's almost like a call and response with his own playing. And so he, you know, I found, you know, as an introduction to him, it was a great introduction to him. So I learned that's really a kind of a stamp of his playing in general. And the second piece is a solo piece, unaccompanied by Gary Peacock, Portrait of a Silence. I think his only other solo album where he's unaccompanied for the most part is December Poems. It's a really nice album. Jan Gabark guests on a couple cuts, but a lot of that, majority of that is him solo, unaccompanied bass. You know, and here it's just him in real time, you know, no overdubbing. Starting off very slow and gradual, minimalistic, a lot of repeated phrases. Almost starting off maybe slightly tedious, where you're wondering, is he going to go any further than this? Just, you know, 2 or 3 notes. But then he gradually goes deeper into the range of the instrument, as well as the complexity of his playing. You know, lines are getting a little more complex. Again, kind of finding a way to play both melodically and rhythmically, in a sense. You know, kind of straddling those strains. There's a piece by Glenn Moore off of his early collaboration with Ralph Towner. I think Solos and Trios it's called Belt of Asteroids, which is kind of has kind of a similar feel to it. But you really get a sense of his playing, his tone, and his own, you know, his, well, just like in the title, his great respect for silence. You know, allowing the silence to kind of determine what comes next, and recognizing the importance of it, the silence within the piece. So just a great introduction to his going more in depth into his actual playing, and you know, how he really kind of a sense of the instrument and the player becoming kind of one entity. You know, it may sound a little cliched, but he's that really, you know, it comes to the fore with a lot of these artists here. Next piece is Soft Touch, another Paul, you know, shorter solo piece. A little more jagged, a little more, maybe not atonal, but angular maybe, which is again another aspect of his playing. Where kind of the sometimes he'll start off with a deconstruction, and then the melody will kind of emerge from that, kind of out of the mist. So kind of a reverse of the first piece in a way. Next up we have Speak Easy. So we have Gary again with, for me it's like an incredible opening. It almost sounds like he's making use of kind of an elastic quality of the instrument, of the strings of the bass, kind of going up and down in a certain way. You know, just a different approach to improvisation, almost like a call and response with himself. But then Tony comes in, and you got to hear him for the first time. Drums and percussion, about as distinctive of a drummer as I think you'll ever hear. I sometimes wonder if he has maybe his own homemade drums in a way, or they don't sound like just your typical drum set. The cymbals, and sounds like there's some tuned percussion, like smaller drums. but another person who paces things very, very interestingly, and uses silence a certain way. For lack of a better word, somewhat abstract, but can play as straightforward and rhythmically as anyone else. Although on here it's more of a kind of a spacious, improvisatory. It's kind of an interesting conversational approach they have between the two of them here. Next piece, Interface. The only cut in which all four players are on together, unlike the previous album where they play together for the most part. And it doesn't start off tentatively so much, but it is more gradual, where they're just kind of, each person comes in really in this order. Paul comes in with some phrases very gradually. Gary responds, and you hear Tony's cymbals and hi-hat, which you can do as much with a hi-hat or a cymbal as a lot of people with just the whole kit. And then John coming in on baritone sax, and this is my first time hearing him. John's playing outside of the earlier Bar Phillips album, just slowly kind of following, almost like they're following each other into this room, this kind of a darkened room. Not quite sure what's in there, but again, they're not really tentative. They're like, they really want to explore this, but they're doing it a little gradually, and just kind of telling the person behind them what's up ahead a little bit, and then once they're in there, the conversation starts a little more, and then, but it doesn't get too active. They keep it quiet, as if don't want to disturb the next room. Maybe that's the way I don't know. That's the way I hear it. But yeah, nice introduction to this group playing together on that piece. Yeah, because it was some years before I heard the other collaboration, Adventure Playground. So this was early on. Next piece, Alignment, is a solo John Sermon, unaccompanied on baritone sax. Probably the first time I'd ever heard an unaccompanied baritone sax piece. Starting off kind of Baroque-like in a way, almost like a slight Bach sort of figure, then going into something a little deeper and wider. And you really hear the range of his instrument. If you know his playing, he makes the baritone sound like it could be any other number of instruments, going well, extending the range, upper range, more than most people I've heard, and yeah, just doing a great deal in a short amount of time here. And next up we have Fair Share, a duo between Paul and Gary. We've been long-time collaborators all the way, up until this point. And now this is probably one of my favorite pieces on the album, and I'd say the most conversational, where they really sound like they're kind of having kind of a dry or wry exchange, going back and forth. Sometimes it gets not heated, but a little more active or a little more animated, and then as they go towards the end, it gets a little more contemplative. But a lot of interesting call and response on there as well. Years of shared experience musically and probably personally, you could kind of hear that in the piece. Just kind of like two old friends, just enjoying each other's company, but still challenging each other a little bit along the way. And again, the pacing and the tone of both of their instruments, as distinctive as anything that I've heard, even since then. Next up, another John Sermon piece, Article 4. Now this is a piece where he's credited as the composer, and this one, it's a trio. Everyone plays except Paul, and now he's on bass clarinet. So this is another one that unfolds gradually. You hear a little bit more of a theme in this one, so it sounds like it's kind of a thoroughly composed theme, and then they kind of expand off of that. But again, kind of a very gradual way, not making it into like a traditional piece or with the usual rhythm, like a bass line and conventional. That's one thing too with the timing on these. There isn't really a conventional meter on any of these pieces. The pacing is very much dictated by the moment, it sounds, and what they're hearing from each other, rather than something predetermined, besides just the theme itself. So that's another intriguing thing that I wasn't aware of before hearing this. Next up we have Married Alive, Paul. Kind of like the title, has a bit of a pun, a little bit of a humor to it, which you can hear that a lot in his playing. Again, rather dry, but kind of a tongue-in-cheek or a wink type of thing. Again, with his pacing, a lot of sort of chasing his own melodies back and forth, catching up with himself and then going in another direction, and almost like he's trying to fool himself when he's playing, like or what's the saying, Gary Peacock in the interview was talking about Miles Davis. Miles had asked him, show me what you don't know in your playing. Don't play what you do know, play what you don't know. And it sounds like he's always doing that, whether he's playing solo or with other people, as well as, you know, the whole group. That's a really nice piece. And then we have Speculating, a very short improvisation between Paul and Tony. Paul just starts in with a couple figures. Tony follows with, again, a lot of hi-hat, and he has an interesting technique. It sounds like he's doing with, like, rubbing the drumstick on the cymbal, making it almost sound like a piece of sheet metal being struck or rubbed, and a little more kick drum there. But it's a very short, just kind of almost kind of a vignette, and then they just say a few things to each other at the very end, and then that's it. Tomorrow Today, another solo piece by Gary. Again, more like a really short story or poem. Again, the tone of his instrument coming out really strong and powerfully on there. And finally, Note Police, beautiful piece by Paul. Again, in this one it starts off almost sounding like it's going to be a standard of some kind, like his own standard, and, you know, further deconstructs it, gets a little more abstract and shadowy, and then towards the end it's almost like a ballad emerges out of nowhere. It's really beautiful and a haunting melody, very poignant, and then just it just closes on that. Very kind of mysterious, and the whole album has kind of a not darkness in a negative sense, but yeah, just a lot of kind of uncertainty. We're going into uncharted territory together, and sometimes it's separate, sometimes it's alone, but it's always just really fascinating. And again, hearing this, I think I was 17 or 18 when I heard this, it really opened things up as far as listening and hearing people explore music together in real time like this. So yeah, In the Evenings Out There, collaboration between Paul Bley, Gary Peacock, John Sermon, and Tony Oxley. Yeah, definitely recommend if you're not familiar, or if you're already familiar and didn't know about this one. It's a good introduction to any one of the artists, just to get kind of like a little snapshot of each one in different contexts. And again, Gary Peacock, you know, first time really getting into his playing a little further, a little more intimate and up close, besides the Keith Jarrett trio. So yeah, just something I've really been enjoying lately, among other things. And yeah, at some point I'll come on and maybe show a few more of his, either multiple ones or maybe focus on another one in particular. This is a few that, you know, there's so much there, you know, that you could just kind of home in on, and it's special stuff. So yeah, rest in peace, Gary Peacock. Yeah, Michael was mentioning that in his video too. It didn't seem to be mentioned very much. I don't know, because he's quite, you know, it's not for lack of being well known. I mean, among jazz bass players, but he should be better known and acknowledged. So yeah. And once again, In the Evenings Out There. Nice early 90s ECM dater. Yeah, just wanted to share that, and yeah, I'll see what comes next. Doing a lot of listening and revisiting as ever. So, 'tis the season. So, salute, and yeah, I hope we're all doing well, and it's pleasant where you're at. And well, to the next one. Peace, love, and joy.